Race fans, it's time to buckle in and listen to the fastest hour in racing radio. Your driver is a multi-time NASCAR winner and Hall of Famer Mark Martin. We cover racing, grassroots, history, we bench race, we talk life, and most importantly, we smash the loud pedal. It's time to turn some laps on the Mark Martin Podcast.
Episode number 20 of the Mark Martin Podcast, and we're going to roll into year 1978, the year 1978 of Mark Martin's career. But before we do that, again, race fans, make sure to hit Mark Martin POD, markmartinpod.com on the internet. Get all the old episodes, downloads, links, and make sure to subscribe on all of the different players. Give us that 5-star rating. Mark Martin Pod, markmartinpod.com. Also, make sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Mark Martin Pod. But Mark, we're going to roll into a big year, and I know you're excited about this one, 1978 of your racing career.
Yeah, so we'll follow up on 1977, where we got our first initiation on pavement racing, asphalt racing. Wound up dipping our toe a little bit into ASA and winning the ASA Rookie of the Year and going from zero to recognized hot shoe in 1 year. So as the season winds down, as I said before, Ed Howe had offered a new chassis, free new chassis to us. So we had a new car out on the horizon that we were going to put together over the winter. We had plans on running the full ASA circuit to try to win the championship because, you know, that would get us some really good experience and recognition. I had New Smyrna Speed Week set in my sights. After our first season down there, I wanted to go down there and race for the championship, and needed to build a new hauler. And I don't know why in the world that I thought that a Ford Cube van would be the right hauler to pull this new trailer that my dad designed or came up with. And was having built, but I thought a Ford Cube van was the hot setup. So located a Ford Cube van with a 460 in it. We were not Ford people. My dad was 100% ride or die Chevy guy. So I don't even know how I pulled that off. But as it turns out, it was a mistake. The trailer was built out of steel. It was a massively heavy trailer with quite a bit of storage on the front of it. It was insane how heavy this thing was. We pulled into Springfield with it, the first race of the season, and Danny Ryan was one of Dave Watson's crew guys, and as we pulled in and parked, Dan Ryan says, "Toot toot, here comes the Queen Mary." I mean, it was huge. I'm telling you. So anyway, we get this rig all put together, and prior to getting that rig out on the road, of course, we had to go get our chassis from Beaverton, Michigan. It's a huge drive from Arkansas, and I had a Dodge van. Man, it was a badass Dodge van with a 440 in it, headers, Holley 4-barrel, wide tires and wheels, fender flares, front spoiler. It was a badass rig. And just a little car trailer that we had. So I hook up the van and the trailer, and this is probably December of 77, and get ready to go by myself all the way up to Beaverton. And I think, man, Rusty, as in Rusty Wallace out of St. Louis, would love to go to Ed Howe's and see his place, because we're just learning the world. So I called up Rusty. I said, "Hey, Rusty, I'm going to go pick up a new chassis at Howe's. You want to ride up there with me?" He said, "Hell yeah, buddy." So I go through St. Louis, pick up Rusty, and we head off to Beaverton, which was the site of pure embarrassment a year before, and get the chassis, and we head back home. We get down, get over into, I think, Indiana, and it starts snowing, and it gets worse, and it gets worse, and it gets worse, and now it's like, I don't know, I'd say it's 11 o'clock at night, Rusty and I in this van, and the snow is starting to drift over the interstate, and it's getting deeper and higher, and finally we come to where the snow has drifted over the highway, probably head high, and it's impassable. And so Rusty and I are like, oh my God, we got to turn this thing around. So Rusty gets out, and we do about a 15-point turn around there on the interstate, which is now down to about one lane wide with all the snow. We get that baby turned around, and we must be the luckiest people on earth, because we go back up the road for a little ways, and we come to a hotel, and it has rooms. Unbelievable. So anyway, we're talking about midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. We get a room, crash out, get some sleep, then get up the next morning and head on down. Now the roads, they've cleared the roads, and head on down to St. Louis and drop Rusty off, and I go on to Batesville. And that's just an incredible story in itself. We were just teenagers out here seeing the world. And one of the things we would never think of stopping and sleeping. I mean, it's, oh no, how we do it is we drive straight through. It don't matter 18 hours, whatever it is. That's just how we do it, 20 hours. So, the weather did force us to stop and get a little sleep, but that was a pretty cool story. So back in Batesville, we were putting this car together, and I decide that I need to find some help with, along with Banjo, who Banjo had the fall of '77. Banjo had gone to the Cincinnati race, and we ran that race, and on the way home we were going to drop him off in St. Louis, and he didn't really want to get dropped off, so brought him home. He moved in with me and was there ever since, a fixture in the program. So I found this guy at the Snowball Derby in '77 that I really seemed to like. His name was Rennie Wheelbanks, and we talked Rennie into moving from South Carolina to Batesville, moving his family up there. And he was an experienced guy and someone that could really help us. And by May, Larry Shaw had decided to do something different anyway. So Shaw moved on. So Rennie was the adult in the crowd, and we take off chasing our. Well, first we go to New Smyrna for Speed Weeks, and we run Speed Weeks, and it's an uneventful Speed Weeks for us. We run good. We don't win a race. Like I said before, the competition was insane, but we were very, very good and very consistent, and we did win the title based on consistency. So that was great for us, because we're really trying to build my name and get recognized, and that was a good way to start off the season. And so we get into the ASA season up there in the Midwest, chasing all those races, and we ran really good, really, really good. It takes us a long time to get a win, but we do really good in the points, and finally we pull off a couple of wins later on in the season. And this is a year where the things that really stand out in my mind are the episodes. You remember now, this is before cell phones. And I'm going to bring you back to that tow truck. And these tow trucks were big back then because not only, we drove day and night in those things, and we all traveled together. Well, we blew up not one, but three of those 460s in that Ford Cube van. Blew the motors up on the side of the road in the middle of nowhere, and have to walk to somebody's house and knock on the door and ask to borrow a telephone, to get rescued. So that tow truck was a disaster, and it only made it the 1978 season. I had to look into the next really cool, one of the top two coolest haulers I ever had. We built for the 79 season, but that's another story. We had a great year in 78. We used Baker engines out of Grand Rapids, Michigan. Really good power, really good reliability. Remember I'd used Tampa Joe's motors in 77, and we blew up, our share of motors in 77. So it was great to have a great power plant. We had a great chassis. I was really learning tires, the Firestone tires we were running on. I was really learning the compounds. Back then it was open, you could run any compound you wanted. And I was really learning the compounds and the ins and the outs of those tires. It was really interesting. That was the year that on the serial number on the tires, it would tell what week that they were built in, the date. And the 51 compound was a softer compound. You couldn't run them a lot of places. They would grain. You could run them on the left some, but you couldn't run them on the right. And I stumbled across some 19th week 51s, and the chemist must have spilled something in that batch accidentally, because these things were as fast as a 51 but wouldn't grain. So you could run those 51s at a lot of places where you usually had to run the 46s and really haul butt. So when I discovered these tires, I called every tire distributor that I could think of or find in the United States, and I bought them all up. Even though I was on a tire deal, I bought these things because they were magic. I also learned that the 20th week 51s were the same way. So I'm hoarding up 19th and 20th week 51s all over the place. I'm still racing out of Batesville, Arkansas, and we decide to do this. Rusty and I decide to travel together and do this big sweep up through, Fort Wayne, Indiana, Grand Rapids, Michigan, Toledo, Ohio, someplace in Mount Clemens, Michigan, and then several other ASA races that were sprinkled in there along those things. So it was going to be about a 2-week swing. And so I have to, I'm going to take my tires, man. I can't be buying tires off the tire truck, because starting with the 21st week, the 51s went back to the way they were before. So I had this whole mess of 19th and 20th week 51s. So I rented a 24-foot U-Haul truck to put all my tires in and extra equipment in, since we were going to be going that long. We had to take extra racing fuel and a lot of wheels and a lot of things that wouldn't fit on our trailer. So I load that up. We go through St. Louis, hook up with Rusty. We go to Fort Wayne, Indiana, the first race out, and Rusty wins that thing. Man, he was, he thought he had won the Daytona 500. It was awesome. So we go, all up through all these different places. And one of the things that stands out in my mind was when we went to Mount Clemens, we didn't make any prior arrangements for hotel rooms. And so after the race at Mount Clemens that night, which I don't think Rusty or I either one did any good, Rusty blew up, and I don't think I ran very good. So we leave the racetrack, and heck, we need a place to sleep and a parking lot to work in the next day to get ready for the next race. So we find this, we see this place called the Georgianian Inn. So we wheel our rigs in there, 3 rigs, the tire, U-Haul, the U-Haul full of tires, and my rig and Rusty's rig, and all us guys. We go inside, see if they got rooms, and sure enough, they do. But this is a fancy place. Didn't look fancy, but they thought they were fancy. They were wearing like tuxedos in there that was working in there and stuff. And this is midnight or after. So we get our rooms. We go, me and Banjo go in, our room and go to bed. And of course, Rusty, because Rusty's a couple years older than me, Rusty and my dad, who was a partier too, and at the time, and well, they go out partying. And that's a long story too. They broke the windshield. They were all piled up in Rusty's hauler, gone out to the clubbing or whatever, and we're driving wild, doing wild stuff on the way back. Some slammed on the brakes, and somebody flew up into the windshield and cracked the windshield of his hauler. So it was all cracked up for the rest of the trip. But anyway, so we get our sleep. Rusty's got to change motors in the morning in the parking lot, and we've got to pack wheel bearings and do all our maintenance on our. So we get up, early in the morning and unload the race cars, put them on jack stands, pull the tires and wheels off. Rusty's got the motor out of his car. Rusty ran Kern Motors back then, and poor old Rusty, he blew up motors all the time, like we did the year before. He was always breaking motors, so his motor was out. And there was drain pans scattered around. I had my tires and wheels all out there, and my tools. I was by hand, changing, dismounting tires and mounting more tires. So it looked like a bomb went off. And this guy comes out that works there in a tuxedo, and said we was going to have to get all that junk out of there. Well, of course, that was insulting to Banjo. We had to pull Banjo off of this guy. Banjo just about had to hit him over all that. So we calmed it all down. We finished up our work, got the heck off of their parking lot, and went on racing. We went to Berlin to race, and all I'd heard for a year was, oh, Berlin, if you can win there, you can win anywhere. Oh, it's so, it's such a challenge, yeah. We roll in there, and for the first time, and we get the win there. So that was Rusty's got to win, I got to win. Man, we're doing good on our big swings. So I remember that night just like anything. I actually remember the T-shirt that I wore that night, and I remember a picture of someone taken of that particular T-shirt. It's just crazy how you remember things, certain little things. But we go on to do our other racing. Our last stops were Owasso, Michigan, where a year before I had impressed Herb from Ed House and turned the tables from being an embarrassment to that bunch to getting favorable treatment. So that was pretty cool. Anyway, we go to Owasso, run a 100-lapper, ASA 100-lapper on Sunday afternoon, and as soon as it's over with, we load up as fast as we can get loaded up and head to Toledo to run Toledo on Sunday night. And all I'd heard was, how fast Joey Fair was there and whatnot. So we roll into Toledo, and all I really remember about that thing is passing Joey on the outside to take the win there at Toledo. First time there as well. I'm sure we didn't get very much practice. So, it was a really, really cool swing. We had lots of fun. Rusty and I and his crew and my crew traveled together. There was a lot of camaraderie. Rusty and I both had success and won some races on that tour. It was pretty special. One of my trademarks was consistency, bringing the car home in one piece, and taking care of my equipment. I had really gone from the previous year from being called by Bob Seneker Captain Crunch to someone who really could take care of his equipment, not tear anything up, keep the fenders on, not bend any ball joints or tie rods, and be able to strike at the end of these races and collect points. And so between that and pulling off a couple wins that year, we won the ASA championship at 19 years old, which was really, really a big deal at that time. Like I say, it's nothing today, but at that time, that was just young and unheard of. And ASA was a very recognized organization, and it was really, really good for my career. Really got a lot of attention. People were hearing my name and knew what we were doing. And at that point, at the end of the season, I was far from learning everything I needed to learn. I actually was just getting a decent foothold. I'd been out of high school now for a year and a half, and was working on the car more and more all the time and learning, about the chassis and about the bodies and about the aero and about the tires. So looking into 79, it was my thought that we would just, hone in and get even better. And of course, the same deal still stood with Ed House. So I was faced at the end of 79 with about the same task as at the end of 78. I'm sorry, at the end of 78, faced with the same task as the end of 77, which was got to build a new hauler because that hauler ain't worth a damn. And drop, unreliable and breaking motors on the side of the road. So we got to build a new truck and trailer, and of course build a new Howe car that would be even better than the one that I ran in 78. So these are the things that I've got on my agenda. I look toward 79, and I don't see any benefit in me going and racing speed weeks at New Smyrna because it was really expensive and you couldn't make any money. All you could do is spend money. And I'd already won that championship, and it had already helped my career. and going down and trying to do it again wasn't going to be worth what it was going to cost us to go run down there. On the other hand, I had just won the ASA championship, and that was really getting a lot of noise made for my career. So my plan was to not race New Smyrna, but to go down to Speed Weeks and go out to New Smyrna and go out to the NASCAR track and go to the Oval Track Trade Show, which is now probably like the PRI show in Indy. They used to have the Oval Track Trade Show down at the convention center in Daytona Beach during Speed Weeks. So I was going to go there with my newfound recognition and work all the booths there and see what kind of deals, free stuff I could get. So that was kind of my plan. And we will pick that up, in the 79 season podcast. So I won't go any further there. But, I think one thing that I would like to touch on before we move into anything else was I left one part about 77 out that was pretty significant. And that was, as soon as I graduated from high school, I asked Larry Phillips. I was racing Larry Phillips every Friday and Saturday night at Springfield, Missouri, and Fort Smith, Arkansas, typically. And I asked Larry if he would give me a job at he had a performance place where he built some race cars and parts and sold parts and stuff. And Larry was gracious enough to give me a job. So as soon as I graduated, I moved up to Springfield and got an apartment and went to work in his shop. And at that point in time, I really wasn't much of a welder at all and not any of a fabricator yet. And I don't know what I thought I was going to do working for him, but the first day on the job, he walks me out to the work bench and shows me a upper A-frame jig and says, "Build some upper A-frames." Man, I'd hate to have been the customer that bought those things. They look, the welds did not look very pretty on them. But that's how I learned. And Larry was a great guy. He was fun to work for, fun guy. And later on, I wound up one week, his car, he raced on the weekend, and it was, he had never touched it all week. And on Thursday, he says, "Mark, I need you to get my car ready to race," which was to race against my car. So he had me do maintenance on his car, change the gears and rear end gears and quick change gears and whatnot, and do the maintenance on his cars. And I thought that was pretty interesting. And then, on Friday night, we go out to the racetrack and I race him. So that was pretty cool. But I left that part out. That was a very important part in my development because Larry gave me the opportunity, to really learn how to fabricate. And he gave me a job because I think he knew that I was a racer and I wanted to learn. And, he certainly didn't need me. At that time, I don't think he had a lot going on at his shop. I recall being in there at that place, just me and him up in the front office and sometimes and me in the back. So, it was an interesting time, and I'll always be grateful to Larry for making me feel like somebody, giving me a job when I wasn't of any use to him really at all. So that was a real special time. I would really like to see Larry Phillips get in the NASCAR Hall of Fame. He deserves to be in there more than many of us, probably more than I do. He didn't win any Cup races, but what he did in the NASCAR Regional Series will never be topped. I think he won 87% of his starts, 5 championships, 87% of his starts. I'll say that again. It was just absolutely insane. Larry was an incredible racer and a lot of fun. So kudos to Larry and me getting that experience. And I hate don't mean to jump backwards, but I forgot to include that one in the 77 one, so I wanted to do that. And that kind of wraps up, my memories of 78. We went a lot of places for the first time, a lot of racetracks. We spent a lot of time running up and down the road. Trying to race out Arkansas was tough. It was a lot of travel, but we made it work.
So to give fans a kind of a snapshot, you won the ASA National Rookie of the Year in 1977, and then you won the championship in 78. Not only 78, but 79 and 1980.
Yeah, that story's for another day. But yeah, we did wind up, winning 3 back to back. 78 was a very important season to me, and there were a lot of interesting things that I did. But the 79 season is full of interesting things as well. And it really leads into the 1980 season, which is probably 80 and 81 are my crown jewels of my career. The things that I was able to do, the things I did, still astound me today. I just can't believe the things that I was able to do and how we did it, and I'm so proud of. And we just didn't know any better, and it was a different time in racing. But this 79 season sets up 80 and 81, so it's a very important and critical building block that will be I'm really excited to share with everybody, because it sets up 80 and 81, which are going to be the two most fun probably podcasts of the whole series for me, because this was a time when I was doing the bulk of the speed work myself, my own hands. As I said before, I was even in 78, I was out with the tire tools and changing tires, mounting and dismounting tires. I was really learning the tires in 78. In 79, I start really taking on the setup side of things, because I moved from Batesville to Indiana and set up shop there. So I'm on my own. My dad's not around, Shaw's not around. Rennie Wilbanks only lasted that 1 year. He stuck with me through the whole thing and helped me get that championship. But that was all that he could take of it. It was a tough life, and so he moved back to South Carolina. So just me and Banjo wind up moving to Indiana and setting up shop all over again. So I really learned the setups and the bodies big time in 79. And by 80, I'm doing, all the body hanging and all the setup and all the tires and all the design, design of any kind of experimental parts and pieces and whatnot. So those are, when your handprints are all over the, that thing that brings you the checkered flag. It means a lot more than when you don't even have a fingerprint on anything other than a steering wheel, which is how it winds up being, later on in my NASCAR career. So those are special years, and I'm excited about getting 79 going, so that I can kind of start setting the stage for for 80 and 81. Also, the tow truck that we put together is the coolest. It may be the second coolest, or it may be the coolest of my career. It's just unbelievably cool setup, and it's kind of derived from. I kind of copy what Rusty had for a tow truck. It seemed like the hot setup, so I just take and improve on that a little bit. So it'll be fun to get into that story next time.
Speaking of any of these old tow trucks, have you ever, found any of these, or did you ever want to get some of these back?
I haven't found them, and I don't really, it's never crossed my mind. I can't imagine finding them. I've always had more important things, in front of me than that. The trailer find was pretty cool from the 74, 75 trailer, but no, and I don't expect to. And, even if I did, it would cost a fortune, and it would just be something that would sit around. So I'm not very interested in it. However, if it was to happen to present itself, that would be, I'm sure I'd be all over it.
No, let's talk about something here we haven't touched on yet, but sponsorship. How did you get up and down the road in 1978?
In 78, my dad was paying the bills. We were on a tire deal, and so that helped a lot. And we had a few other deals as well. And we won some pretty decent purse money, but that was one of the things that sets up 1979. Is my relationship with my father had deteriorated at this point in 78. He was frustrated that he couldn't go to all the race. He could go to some of the races, but he wasn't able to go to all of them. And I was wanting to be the boss, and I was wanting to become a man, and I was wanting to not be financially attached to him. And it was a time in his life when I wasn't approving of how he was living. And so I was getting frustrated by the end of 78, which really sets up 79, and, a series of sort of coincidences that really line up and change my entire life and the trajectory of my career, probably. So, that's where we were. I was looking for a way to get more self-sustained. Now, we were still in an era when you did more with less. You didn't spend money like you spend today. You didn't buy parts like you did today. You made a lot of your own parts, and so it was expensive, but it wasn't the kind of expensive that it is today to go racing.
All right. So another thing about this too, as we talk about these years, 77, 78, 79 going into the 80s, there's also some companion listening, some podcasts that we recorded last year that you might want to go check out. Episode 6 with Dave Watson, Episode 10 with Dave Watson and Larry Shaw, and then Episode 3, going all the way back to Episode 3, the lack of spring in ASA. So a lot of these really match up with the years that we're talking about right now.
They do, Barry, and it's good that you bring that up. We need to make sure that when we get this out on social media and stuff, that we have some interesting we make sure that people understand the significance of each year, some of the milestones, and what they mean, because they're not just years of racing. These particular years are really setting the stage, and we're really making progress in leaps and bounds, and coming from the dirt in Batesville, Arkansas to ASA, the youngest national champion in motorsports at the time in 78, and really setting the late model racing world on their ear, so it was big. I mean, we were really all over Stock Car Magazine, Speed Sport News every week, and really starting to get noticed.
So make sure to head over and listen to those old episodes. I think the most interesting piece about that is, while you're trying to generalize and kind of give an overview of the year, there's some of those things like a Dave Watson or a Larry Shaw are going to remember, and some little side stories that actually kind of match up to this and make it even more interesting as we keep going. Another thing is, speaking of the 78 season, 77, go over to the markmartin.com shop, and you have some apparel, some retro apparel, a couple different t-shirts. So if you got a chance, you might want to check those out. Really cool shirts that you put together. What was it, about last year or year before that?
Yeah, it was year before. We've got some cool throwback stuff to the ASA Camaro.
So make sure to go to markmartin.com and hit the t-shirt tab and pick up a couple. There's even a fun one, the retro, the kid baseball tee. So outside of that, race fans, make sure to get on markmartinpod.com, markmartinpod.com. Hit us up on social media at markmartinpod, and also get on your pod player of choice. Make sure to subscribe. Give us that 5-star rating. But this is episode number 20 of the Mark Martin Podcast.
Thank you for subscribing and listening to the Mark Martin Podcast. Remember to give us a 5-star rating in your app store. Connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Mark Martin POD. The Mark Martin Podcast is a production of the Accelerated Podcast Network.